Julie here with Northern Waters Cleansing Co. And today's video is a very large batch of Coco Cabana. This is my second most popular selling soap, and today I'm going to be making 36 pounds of it. So let's get started. Here is a 5-gallon bucket that currently has all of my soft oils in it. Plus I've got some kale and clay there in the bottom that I'm going to mix up now. Then I'm going to add in the hard oils, then the lye water solution, and I'll blend it all up till it gets to emulsion. Okay, so here we are. I have poured off my first container that I'm going to color, and I also have my fragrance oil measured out. And so I really just eyeball this part. I've done this batch so many times that I know the approximate amount that needs to go in. And so there goes my fragrance oil in. And then it's time for color. First color I'm using is this dark gold. Color and fragrance is in. Now I'm going to blend this up, and I'm going to try to get it close to a medium trace because you'll see this design I'm doing is in different layers of color. Okay, that's looking good. I'm gonna move it out of the way and bring my mold in. This is the mold I'm using, and I have to give a big thank you to the soap gal. If you don't watch her channel, you really should, because she has a lot of awesome tips and hacks about scaling your business up. And this was one of her tips, was to use these dough pans. I think it came from webstaurant.com, and that's in the US. So you can use these dough pans because they have these nice straight sides, and this will make a 36-pound batch of soap. So that's what I'm making today. So I'm in Canada. When I bought these from Webstaurant, there was definitely a sizable shipping charge, as well as customs had to be paid. So if you're gonna get them, you know, keep that in mind. Make sure it fits within your budget. I ordered six of them. No, yes, I ordered 6 of them, and for me, it made sense with the shipping and custom fees. So I'm gonna get the first layer in here, let it set up a bit, and then start working on the next layers. Okay, so I've got the next batch of batter poured into my 5-liter container, and let's see, I need my fragrance. That'll work. For this one, it's going to be a very saturated blue color here, and so I mixed up my blue mica. It's Boombox Blue from Candora Soap, and I don't know, my lighting's not really working with me here for you to see that, but this is one of my favorite colors for sure to work with. So I've mixed it up with some of my base oils, and I'm gonna drop it in here. It looks like a lot of color, but when you're dealing with this much soap, that's about how much you need. It's I am sort of sticking to the ratio of 1 teaspoon of mica per pound of soap here. So I'm going to blend this up, and then I'll get ready to pour. Okay, that's looking good. I'm just gonna move that off to the side and I'll pull my soap mold back in. There we are. So I mentioned earlier I'd heard about this mold on the Soap Gal's channel. So I'll definitely leave a link for her channel down below. The reason this mold is so integral to my business growth right now is that if I tried to get a wooden mold of the same size, it's extremely cost prohibitive, meaning it's going to cost me way too much than what I'm willing to spend at this point, and what I stand to make on this large order that I'm working on. So yeah, the soap mold is just, it's an ingenious idea and it's working so well for me. So love that channel, The Soap Gal. If you don't watch it, you really should. I'm gonna use the spatula to break the fall. And I do often start in a corner for this because if the batter does break through, the corners can be part of what I use as sample bars, so I'm not as concerned if the corners aren't perfect. But if you use your spatula to break the fall, I'm sure you've seen other soap makers do this, then you can usually layer the soap nicely on top. So as I'm doing this, I'm not totally worried about it being even right now because I'll go through after and kind of pat it down with my spatula. So right now I'm just kind of eyeballing and trying to get the soap batter where it's supposed to be, but I'm not too worried about how exact it is at the moment. Definitely when you're working with larger batches like this, it helps to have some upper body strength. Especially when you're doing it with my method, I would love to invest in like a tip pot. But again, at this stage of my business, I'm not willing to sacrifice paying myself for the work that I'm doing here, or having to increase the cost of my product just so that I can get some equipment I desperately want to have. I'm much more willing to wait until the company gets to a certain profit level to invest in some equipment. And I would be more than happy to do a video on how I budget, how I figure out my cost of goods sold, that sort of thing. Because ultimately, if you have a soap business, if you have any business that's dealing with physical product, then you really do need to figure out your cost of goods, because that's ultimately going to drive what you charge for your product. Now I say that about a physical product, you got to figure out your cost of goods sold. Funny thing is, I also have an IT company, and there are so many similarities I find between this soap making business and IT. So my other company, deals a lot with writing custom software, and you may not think about it in these terms, but software is actually a creative endeavor as well, because you're always sort of pushing the boundaries of what's in the public domain. When you're writing a software program for someone, you can't just take what's already out there, whether it's open license or whatever, and that just automatically fits what your clients need. Usually you have to, if you're using third-party open code, you're working with that code to really make it exactly what your client needs. So it is a creative process as well. And there are a lot of similarities I find between the soap making business and the IT company in terms of costs can get very out of control very fast. You know, you always got to be asking do I really need this? Is this truly going to increase my production to a point that it's justified? Or is it simply, this is a want that I have? So anyways, I'm gonna let this, back to soap, I'm gonna let this soap layer set up. I've been waiting about 8 minutes in between layers for them to set up enough for me to pour the next one. So I'll wait for this to set up and then I'll be back to pour the next layer. I'm back again for the next layer. I've got my batter poured out here. Again, I'm using the Boombox Blue that I've mixed up ahead of time with the base oils. So in that goes to my batter. What I'm actually doing is sort of like an ombre gradient of lines in this soap. So each of the blue layers do actually have the Boombox Blue in them, and then I'm sort of toning them down with titanium dioxide. Hence me mentioning at the beginning how I use a small water discount in this recipe. So there's that. Here's my water-soluble titanium dioxide. And I need my spoon. I'm going to do just over a tablespoon and see where that gets me. Don't forget the fragrance. Here's the fragrance oil. Again, I'm just sort of eyeing it. Made this batch enough, but I know how much I need here. And I'll blend this up. I wasn't necessarily trying to get to a medium trace here, but I sort of had to, just to really mix in the titanium dioxide the way I wanted. So I'll just give this a little hand stir, get the last little bits of the color off the side, and then I'll be ready to pour it. My batter's definitely getting thicker now, which is fine. It's still very easy to work with. This fragrance oil is one of my favorites to work with because it's never misbehaved on me. Okay, that looks good. I'm going to move it to the side. Okay, and here we go with the next layer. Again, I'm starting in the corner because I'm not too concerned if the soap breaks through in the corner. So it's probably going to be part of my sample bars. But again, just using the spatula to break the fall. You can see it spreading nicely over the top of the last layer, which is great. That's exactly what I want. Layer here. So I've got my Boombox Blue again mixed up with the base oils. We'll go in with that. And because I'm doing a gradient, we're going to go in with a little bit more titanium dioxide than we did the last time. So we're going to do 1, 2, a little bit. Got my fragrance here. I do have a little bit of soap batter left that I'm going to color all white for the top. And I think you can probably tell by now, because it's the Coco Cabana fragrance, I'm going with sort of a water beachy kind of theme. So the white on top will end up being the waves. And just like the other times, I'm going to start in the corner, let the spatula break the fall of the soap. there has been scraped. And I'm just gonna smooth this out a little bit. There we go, looking good. So I have a little tiny bit of soap batter left, and that's gonna be the white accenting waves on top. But first I'm gonna let this sit for about 8 minutes so that the white doesn't break through in any sort of, break through the layer in any sort of unintended ways. Okay, so I didn't actually wait a whole 8 minutes that time because the soap's at a point where it is setting up a little faster now. Let's see if my camera will focus there. Okay, so for the last layer, I'm just using water-soluble titanium dioxide. And with that, we'll see if that's enough. Sometimes I have to mix up a little extra. In goes the last of my fragrance oil. And I'll blend this up. And this time I'm just going to lay the white batter down in sort of strips. I'm not concerned about covering the entire top. Maybe I will have enough here to do that. Doesn't really matter to me if I do, because I'm going to texture the top with a spoon anyways. So if you've made it this far in the video, thanks so much for sticking around and watching the process. I think it's obviously longer for me because I'm waiting between each layer for them to set up. So my recipe is very heavy in olive oil. So I actually let this sit for 5 days before I cut it, which is a little longer than what I would do with some of my smaller loaves. Like if I'm just making 40 batches, if I'm just making 40 bars, I let it sit for, I don't know, maybe 2 days. Like it's hard enough after that, after 2 days, 48 hours-ish for me to cut it. But this one, because of how I sort of have to manhandle this massive slab of soap, I wait for it to get quite a bit harder before even attempting to cut it. So it sits for 4 days in the mold, and then I take it out of the mold and it sits for 1 more day before I decide to cut it. Hi guys, I'm back again, and I think I let this sit for longer than half an hour, but that's okay. It's at a good consistency where I can start texturing the top. And so for this particular soap, again, I'm trying to make it almost look like waves on top, and I'm accomplishing that with a plastic spoon that you can see here. And you can see the technique I'm doing. I'm putting it in, dragging it, and when I'm pulling it out, I'm kind of flicking it a little bit so that white curls over, kind of like a wave does. And we're back 5 days later with the finished slab of Coco Cabana soap. And so what I'm going to do today is first cut it into logs and then slice it up into the individual bars. Okay, so what I've done here is I've put my log splitter at the edge of my table, and on my table I have this work surface set up. So this work surface, it turns out really well that it's the same height, or almost, like very, very close, as the log splitter. So what you're gonna see happen is I'm gonna put this huge slab of soap through the log splitter, and it's not gonna fall off the end of the log splitter and give me like some sort of wonky cut. It's going to glide relatively smoothly across onto my table. And I should say I have just disinfected my table. I always do that before I'm working with soap, like directly on it. So yeah, the slab will slide onto the table, and then I'll ultimately have these these very long logs that I can cut into bars. Okay, so it's time to cut one of these long loaves of soap. And this is what it looks like. And again, you have no doubt seen lots of other soap makers using the multi-bar cutters. I haven't invested in one yet, and you know, I'm doing 2,000 bars for this order, and you know, the bud cutter that just does them one at a time is working fine for my needs. I'm just gonna cut a tiny little bit off the end. I've already set up my bud cutter here at 1 inch. And so I'm just gonna cut through this loaf. So that is the secret to doing these more intricate designs. It's this funny little secret, but I can sum it up in one word, and that is repetition.